Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our discussions and our journeys with respect to those works directed by that phenomenal artist, the one, the only, David Cronenberg. That brings us to a film, an intriguing, a very powerful film in Cronenberg's filmography that is from 1977. It is this film. This is the Blu-ray release of Rabid. Wow, what a film this is. Now, I will speak about this film now I will attempt to make it very general. So for anyone who has not seen this film, Rabid, then I will avoid speaking about any details, plot details, etc. I will save such plot-specific and thematic-specific conversation for the latter part of this video or for a separate video. But for now, let us speak in very general terms about this film, just in case you have not yet seen this. Rabid is another horror film, or it's described often as a horror film from David Cronenberg during the so-called early days of his filmography. Again, it's 1977, so 70s Cronenberg works. Again, this is also a film that showcases a lot of the intensity of a type of what can be described as a Cronenberg horror film. We do have what can be described as monsters. We do have what can be described as villains from a certain perspective. We have the implications on victims. We have the physical altercations. We have violence. We have scenes of blood and attacks and chaos that is in the context of this particular story, or a series of stories that seem to be revolving around this character that we meet very early on, in fact, immediately as the film starts. This is the character of Rose, played very memorably by Marilyn Chambers. So this is the story, in essence, that we see unfold before our very eyes. The film is Rabid. Now, the film is quite intense indeed, and for those who maybe are not into horror films, and horror films that have this slight shocking, or not slight, but quite intense shocking edge to them, in particular with a lot of the scenes of so-called horror, if this is not your cup of tea, then of course you need not have to watch this film. So don't feel the need to have to watch this if this type of genre or this type of cinema is not to your liking. So that's completely okay, not a problem at all. However, if you are okay with this kind of cinema, and if you are intrigued by the works of Cronenberg, then I cannot stress enough just how much I can recommend this film Rabid to you. This film is like all of Cronenberg's works. This film seems to have it all. It is so well structured, and it has this type of almost dual structure, or maybe dual is not enough. There are so many levels or structures that seem to be taking place all at the same time, seemingly, in the context of Rabid. On the one hand, we do have this idea of a monster or a series of monsters, or maybe different sets of monsters, a sort of modern or Cronenberg type of telling or retelling of what is essentially a type of vampire tale that is also combined with a monster that is, in essence, the zombie film. So we have a vampire film combined with a zombie film that is Cronenberg's Rabid. But we also have within those, I think, really entertaining presentations of cinematic genre. We also have the Cronenberg, what can be termed sort of Cronenberg takes or dealings with specific themes and outcomes that have to do, for example, with evolution, and have to do with evolution in the context of transhumanism, or perhaps the lack of evolution, maybe the idea of survivalism, and the idea of adaptation, and the human body adapting. And maybe those forms of adapting could be said to be pathways towards a new evolving human being, or perhaps it is a regressive type of transformation going in the opposite way, depending on one's outtake. And I think even the sort of horror film, the horror film traits of this work, I think, could be said also to be suggestive of a take on the evolutionary Cronenberg dealings of this subject matter in one direction over another. And I'll try to be more specific when we talk about this film later on in the plot-specific discussion of this. But this is my way of saying that this film is also dealing with that wonderful Cronenberg theme of change, of evolution, and the physical transformation of human beings that comes about seemingly due to maybe external events, very sudden, abrupt accidents, but also having to do with the adaptations, or maybe the what might be almost bordering on malpractice, depending on one's point of view, adaptations of medical science, of maybe radical medical science. And maybe that radical medical science application was done in very emergency-like circumstances, granted, but still the results are still the results. And the results do lead to the horror traits that are part of this film, Rabid. And indeed, the horror traits are there. They are there in a type of extravagance, almost horror-filled splendor for all to see. And the results are very, very intense indeed. And also we have discussions, sometimes quite vivid and maybe even uncomfortable discussions of sexuality, and the way in which sexuality seems to be connected to these themes of horror and also these themes of evolution. And also how sexuality is treated as well, human sexuality, physical manifestations of human sexuality, that is in the context of, say, desire or lust, or in the context of survival, or in the context of nourishment, which is a very intriguing aspect, and also in the concept of the ways in which human beings interact with each other in say a discussion of sexual dynamics. And so we have very disturbing outcomes of this type of discussion example, namely the very disturbing scenario involving predators and prey. And so who is the predator, who is the prey, in the context of, as I say, these horror traits that are presented to us in this very ghastly and also very shocking and very, I think, profoundly intriguing and a very thought-provoking way that David Cronenberg and company are so well attuned to, as we've seen time and time again in the films that led up to, or that preceded Rabid, and Rabid itself, and also films that are subsequent to Rabid. So we have these themes, excuse me, and more, as I say, presented in this film that seems to be a combination of many different types of, say, horror film genre entertainment. So there is so much packed within the world of this film, and I didn't even touch upon the implications and the ways in which the performers, the actors, and the production details also implicate and also engender and also create a further intriguing aura about the film. And I think this has to do primarily, or one of the great shining examples of this, is the appearance of Marilyn Chambers in this main character of Rose. And Marilyn Chambers, and it's remarked upon a lot in many of the materials that are the supplementary materials, the commentary tracks, the interviews, etc., about Marilyn Chambers and her background in pornography. This further, I think, enhances and enlightens us about how this film seems to be dealing with in a very direct and also very indirect way, dealing with the nature and role of sexuality, human sexuality, and physical manifestations of human sexuality, but also one's perceptions of sexuality and how those perceptions either shape our viewpoints, shape our perspectives of the world, or warp or otherwise confuse our perspectives and lead us to positions potentially that are maybe not so close to the truth as one might initially think. In other words, we are dealing with not just ideas about manifestations in a physical form, but we're also dealing with perception and how we view things. And so this is, I think, a really powerful way, and it's done in a very meta way, in a very in an incredibly effective way by virtue of casting choice. And so this is a stroke of genius from David Cronenberg and company. And so this is a marvelous move. And it is, I think, an example, a great example of how effective this film Rabid is, as I say, on a multitude of levels, both within the structure of the film and also in terms of its production values and production details, because it is speaking to us on all these levels. And it is also, at the same time, this extravagant and very effective horror film that is also part of the Cronenberg aesthetic. It is also building upon what we've seen before. It is also going in different directions, thus creating a sense of excitement and aura in the now ever-evolving canon of Cronenberg. So this is that 1977 classic film, which is Rabid. So if you have not seen this film Rabid, then, and if you are a fan of the works of Cronenberg, if you are into horror films or intense films, this does have certain scenes of intensity and violence and gore effects, that's for sure. It is also, and it's done, I think, in a really effective way, in an entertaining way, and also in a way that is very much part of the genre. And it is also done in that way that Cronenberg does so well, which is to create a sense of unease and to perturb, and also to create this sense or engender this atmosphere of thought-provoking Cronenberg style, and what that he does with such genius and such a power. This is the work by David Cronenberg, which is Rabid from 1977. And so in the next video, I will be speaking about specific details. So if you have not seen the film yet, I encourage you to check out the film again if you are interested in this type of work, if you're interested in the works of Cronenberg. And if you are interested in a specific plot intense discussion, then I look forward to seeing you at the next video, my dear, dear friends.